Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Next Level Real Talk Podcast, where we have conversations on the journey of personal transformation and the pursuit of lasting peace and happiness with Sheldon and David. And welcome back to another episode of Next Level Real Talk with Sheldon and David. How are you doing, David?
Doing great. It's been a great week. How about yourself?
Doing awesome. Doing awesome. And
Good.
weather's a little overcast out here, but
Oh.
we had a guest planned. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, he wasn't feeling well. So hopefully, we'll get him on either next week or the week after as soon as he's getting better. So, best wishes to him. And hopefully, he has a speedy recovery and it's just a short temporary thing.
Mhm.
Um, but in the
Best wishes to
meantime,
him. Good luck, good health. Yep.
yes, yes, he's got an awesome story. So, looking forward to hearing his story and all of that. Um, And we have a couple other guests actually I've got a couple
Mhm.
others and you have some, they're all lining up,
Yep.
so we'll be bringing some
We're
people in
getting them
here.
there. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
So, and so obviously we weren't expecting that today, but
right.
for those of you that do listen semi regularly or regularly, we do not script this. Okay, we always sit down and talk. We kind of have ideas of what happens throughout the week, or people talk to us about, or we just sit and talk and like, hey, this is something we should be talking about. Um, and this is something I talked about the Inner Excellence book, that football player from the Eagles was reading during the playoffs,
Yep.
and I think even during the Super Bowl itself. Um, and in reading that, I haven't finished it, so I haven't really talked about it. I wanted to finish it first, but then when we found out that he wouldn't be able to be here, I was like, hey, thinking about some stuff and just kind of, I'm like, Lord, what do you want us to talk about today? There's something somebody needs, and this popped up in my brain. Hold on, I got to put on my eyes. Forgot it. This popped up. I was like, hey, let me go see if that's something around that I can really talk about. And this was so in the inner excellence. Uh, this is I'm going to do a paragraph, skip a paragraph, and read a paragraph. So should I read the whole thing? Those just the whole
At least the
paragraph?
first one, you'll see how that goes,
Yeah,
yeah.
first, yeah. Um, so it says the more comfort in your life, the harder it is to face discomfort. This doesn't mean comfort is bad. It just means that the more time you spend on the couch, the harder it is to get off of it. And the more people on the couch with you, the harder it is to get off. To get off, it is as well. So just saying, the more time you spend, in comfort in life, you don't feel when discomfort comes, it's hard.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the that second paragraph, real quick, says the more pain in your life, the more gratitude you have for when you don't have pain.
Mhm.
Note we're talking about the pain of discipline and pushing yourself to become someone you've never been before, not the pain of abuse, which may need immediate intervention. You may have had really bad things happen to you, but remember this. This is a great line right here. You can carry your past with you in bitterness, or you can let it go in forgiveness. And
That's
this
beautiful.
whole thing is off of obviously sports. Okay, it's off of sports metaphors and stuff like that. But sports is life, and life is sports. Both of us have been in sports, but as we're talking about, sometimes in sports, that discomfort, you got to push yourself in
Yep.
sports, but in life, that discomfort when you go through stuff, you learn, and the next time you go through something, it may be a little harder, but you've been through that discomfort of some sort.
Yeah, and I always say that, the hardest I was a drug addict, right? Been through all kinds
Mhm,
of different addictions, and one of the things that having been through the addictive pattern that's so helpful in other aspects of your life is that I always said that how you think is the most addictive pattern that you have. So your
mhm,
mind and how it operates has these reactive patterns to stimuli. So you see something happen and your mind instantly does something, you react, right? And we've talked about that a lot, right? The pattern interrupt, how do you stop, drop and breathe, take a breath to
mhm,
stop that reactive pattern. But also the patterns, right? So pattern recognition is how the brain works, right? It's all about pattern recognition. That's all in the neuroscience of keeping you safe and making you feel comfortable. So when you
mhm,
have these patterns and you get used to them, right? Even if they're limiting patterns, even if they're not the best pattern for you, like it's an
mhm,
abusive pattern, like you grew up in an abusive household, so you're used to this sort of like codependent negative dynamic,
mhm,
but it's something you're familiar with. Um, it's the comfort of the known suffering
Mhm.
is easier to stay with than the discomfort of breaking out of that into something completely unknown and
Mhm.
fearful, even if it's better for you, right?
Yes.
That's kinda what that thing is talking about, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's talking, when he talks about, that last thing, you can carry that, that past in
Mhm.
bitterness and just stay there and just
Yeah, and
say,
then how do you
"I'm
release
upset with
that and go
anger."
into something new? Yes.
Yeah, and so when I read that, I was like, "Wow, that is so real," and
Yeah.
things we've talked about and I've been
Mhm.
through, you can live
Mhm.
in there and say, "Yeah, well, that person hurt me, and Imma stay there."
Yeah.
And understand, like he said in the book, abusive stuff that needs immediate intervention. We're talking about other,
Yes.
non-abusive, physical abuse and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Please understand that. Um, so, but that if you hold on to it, that's where that negative insideness, that bitterness,
Mhm.
hurts you. And we talked about letting that go,
Right.
and that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It's Hey, it's easy to sit on the couch. I've come home from work going like, "Oh my god, I'm so tired. I'm just gonna go home."
Yeah.
And this last week I was sick, quite a bit, really sick last week, and I was coming. When was it? We had something at school that I'd stick around for, and so I was like, it was the play at school, and I go, you know what? I'm gonna go work out. And I will tell you, I was nowhere near work. I could have sat there on one of the couches at the school in the library and go, "I'm taking a nap. I need to lay
Mhm.
down. I'm still
Mhm.
not doing good." I said, "No, I'm gonna go swim a little bit." And I went out of that comfort zone of a
Yep.
couch, literally out of the couch, going like, "I can go lay down over there." Went and swam, about maybe 3/4 of my normal workout, but not
Mhm.
as fast, just kind of
Yep.
swam.
Yep.
And I will tell you, I felt so much better.
Yeah.
So there's that metaphor. Not only I did it sport wise, I went and worked out, but it helped me personally to get out of that little of I'm sick. I can just lay here. I got, let myself just cure, blah, 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 but no, I said, no, I'm going to do it. And I
Yep.
got up and I did it. And so that's a big key. I mean, yes, I was sick Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Couldn't do anything.
Yep.
There's no way I was going to walk or
Yep.
swim,
Yep.
you know, but, I was like, I'll do a little bit. No, I didn't
Yep.
do the whole workout,
Yep.
and I didn't do as hard, but I
Yep.
did a little bit.
I
So
I I love that, and I think that there's a real okay, so we'll, take this to the next level, right? Because this is next level real talk.
next level real talk.
So, it's a really I think, if you're listening to this, it's a very delicate balance about discipline, right, and pushing yourself. Right? That, okay, hey, you're not doing, feeling so great, right? But let's do it anyway, right? Pushing yourself
Mhm.
out of your comfort zone. And sometimes our mind and our mental thought pattern can be berating and degrading in that mental pattern. You
Yeah.
suck, you're terrible, you need to work out or you're
Mhm.
gonna get fat, you're ugly, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, uh, we don't want that because 'cause I'm a big believer, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, like, it's not what you do, it's where you do it from.
Mhm.
Right? So if you're
Yep.
in this place of loving compassion, right, for yourself. So it's like, "Hey, you know what? I know you're not feeling good, but I think this will be good for you. You need to push through this. Like, let's just do a
Mhm.
little. We don't have to do the whole thing." And being gentle with yourself, but at the same time disciplining yourself and pushing a little, right? "Hey, you know
Yeah.
what? You need to move. And you know what? I know you're not feeling great. Body's not feeling so great right now, but you know what? We don't have to do the whole workout, but we're gonna do something. Let's just get in the pool
Mhm.
and swim. See how it
Yeah.
goes." You know what I mean? It's like how that mental conversation is supportive,
Mhm.
right? But at the same time pushing versus, sometimes I think, especially in the West, we can get really like no pain, no gain, and we can force
Mhm.
ourselves to push when it's really not good for us. I
Yes.
I think
Yep.
I might have mentioned we had, my friend, um, Sean, shout out to Sean. He had a female friend of his who was addicted to running, and she'd run like 10 to 15 miles every day. And
Whew.
she would go out and drink and be hungover and run 15 miles, throwing up while she was running. And she could not
What?
stop running. Yeah, she could not stop running. And she was messing her feet
Wow.
up to where she was going to these orthopedists. And they were like, if you don't, I guess the foot structure, the way the arch is and everything, that if you destroy it, they can't fix it. And they're like, if you keep
Oh,
running, you're going to mess your feet up so bad, we're going to have to amputate your feet.
wow.
And she's just like, F you, and she go to another orthopedist. She
She's
went to
going for
like
her answer.
She
Yeah.
was going for her answer. She kept going to different
Yeah.
doctors, and she got one that said it's okay for you to run, right? Because she wanted to run. And that
Mhm.
obviously is a pretty extreme example, but it's that obvious thing where that discipline and that kind of pushing is not healthy and it's not good for you. It's not in your best interest, you know? And
Mhm.
some people are like that, right? Where and it's actually not that uncommon, right? Where we get to that point where it's a negative, how you're talking to yourself.
Yes.
So being very
Mhm.
conscious and aware of what you're saying to yourself and how you're talking to yourself and being loving and compassionate and supportive. And yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes the discipline of pushing, right? And outside
Yeah.
and especially when it's something like you're moving into an area that you've never experienced before.
Mhm.
Like, let's say you've
Yeah.
always been in a relationship and now you're gonna be alone, but you're afraid of being alone. So you always get in these negative relationships because that's a comfort zone for you, but you seem to always be attracting, an abusive partner or someone who's just degrading and diminishing to you, right? But that's what you're
Or
used to.
or you get into you're like, "Okay, I like being alone, but everybody wants to be in a relationship." You find a relationship where, like, it's not gonna work. "Oh, see, I tried, guys. I
Yeah,
tried this. It's not
yeah,
working." "Well,
yeah,
yeah, because you guys are totally opposites, and it's never gonna work." "Well,
yeah,
I tried." "Well, no, you
yeah,
didn't really. You
yeah,
tried to sabotage it. You
yeah,
did a good
yeah,
job on
you kinda
sabotaging
sabotage it, right? Um, yeah,
Yeah,
and sometimes, that being alone is scary because that's stepping out of the comfort zone, and that's
mhm,
something you've never had, and that's something you've never experienced, and you're terrified of it, but that could be maybe the most healthy thing for you, right? So that's kind of those
mhm.
things that was talking about, right? Stepping into
Yeah,
something that's new, that can feel the pattern is different, and how can you do that in a loving, supportive way for yourself, right?
yeah,
And
and like I
encourage you.
said, the more pain you have, not that we want you to have pain, but
Right.
as you have pain, you learn to have that gratitude for the comfort of where when times are good, you're like, "Wow, times are really good." I wouldn't say that if I never had times of hardship. Does that make sense? If I never had those hardships, I wouldn't realize what times of relax, comfort, ease is.
Right.
So yes, we don't want to go through those things, but understand they are happening in life. If you
Yes.
don't go through something, a struggle in life, then you're lying to me because we've
Yep.
all been there. Some
Yep.
way could some are bigger than others. We're not
Yep.
arguing that. Um, and there's this other quote right off of kind of what you were getting to on Sheldon. It says, "In Western culture, that's us people. In Western culture, suffering is the opposite of success, to be avoided at all costs." That's a sad statement in itself. This perception prevents us from embracing and learning from suffering.
Yes.
So we can learn from that suffering.
Yes.
But as we've said many times, like me, going to therapy. Everybody, oh, don't go to therapy. Oh man, men don't go to therapy. Men don't get help. Men don't, you know, our Western culture is opposite of what it should be. It says that comfort is opposite of success. No discomfort. I mean, come on. It's okay to be discomfort and learn from
And
it
and
and
if you
grow
have
from it.
that thought, if you have that belief, then you're just gonna bury it, right?
Hmm.
Because 'Cause you're not gonna wanna feel it because, "Oh, that's
Exactly.
not being successful." So the right thing to do is to just bury this and ignore it. And
Hmm.
that is absolutely not what this podcast is about. In
No.
terms of the
So,
philosophically speaking, right? Big
hmm.
picture about how do you approach things, you have to go into them and face them. That's,
Yeah.
obviously, with help, with
Hmm.
support, whether that's the wolf pack, whether that's a teaching and a thought process, whether that's a therapist, whether that's a church, um,
Hmm.
a pastor, minister, whatever that is, there's support structures that are out there that you can use to help you and support you to go through, whether that's your faith, right? That to
Yeah.
go through these things that are difficult, but that you have to look at them with forgiveness, as they were saying, right?
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that's how things get released and transmuted in the spiritual talking talks about transmutation of energy, that you cannot destroy energy. That's physics, right?
Yeah.
Energy, once it's there, energy stays, but you can
Mhm,
change the energetic state. So in other words, you can change pain into gratitude. And how do you
mhm.
do that, right? And that transmutation of an energy of suffering goes into forgiveness, can go into gratitude, right? That's what you felt, right?
Yeah.
Initially, it's suffering. Oh, this divorce is so terrible. These things are so hard. You go through this transmutation process, which is allowing that stuff to sort of go through your body and you feel it and you look at it and you learn from it and you grow from it and you look at what the lessons are. You look at it with innocence and without judgment. And then there's this
Mhm.
process of forgiveness, and you're kind of gentle with yourself for being in that state, right? Rather than, oh, you
Mhm.
screwed up. How, how bad are you? All the negative self talk kind of comes up and gets released out. And then at some point, you get to this place where you're like, wow, in a weird way, this whole process was beautiful,
Yeah.
and it
Mhm.
feels weird to say that, right? Because,
'Cause
well,
when I started that process, it was not beautiful.
yeah, and we don't wanna
It was
say that,
hard.
"Oh, your divorce was beautiful and your suffering was beautiful," right? But in a
Yeah.
weird way, when you get to the end and you look back at something like that, that's how it
Mhm.
feels, like everything that happened for a reason, and it's all beautiful, and you
Yeah.
hear all
That
those
journey, that
you
whole
hear
journey was like,
Yeah,
wow, that all took place for a purpose, for a reason,
yeah,
for whatever it is. But as you said, it's like one of those like, wow, I got that happened. That was interesting. That was interesting. And the feelings I went through. I
yeah,
mean, just and I'll say whenever you're going through something, just step back and go like, wow, what's that feeling?
yeah,
Because you may never have that again. I mean,
yeah.
some of those feelings that I hope I don't ever have them again. That anxiety, that inner like
It's
weirdness,
that is
aura,
such a beautiful way to look at it. "Wow, I may never have experienced this again,"
yeah.
let me
What's
just
that feeling?
trip
Like
out
it,
on it and enjoy it a little bit if I can.
yeah,
It's like
yeah. I may never want to experience that again,
Yeah,
but it's like, wow, that was that feeling
I might as
that
well
I was
experience it
feeling.
fully. Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
so it's kinda and I look now after the journey's at this part of my I don't wanna say the journey's done. At
right.
this part
Yeah,
of the
part of it
journey,
is, yeah.
yeah, I look back and go like, "Wow, what made me wanna do that?" I don't
Yeah.
know, but I'm
Yep.
glad that I did step back
Mhm.
and kinda go like, "What is this?" Sit down and go like, "This feeling sucks.
Yeah.
What's going through?" Just kinda
Let
like,
me
wow, I could almost feel every
Yeah.
finger touched or
Yes.
something, just like,
Yes.
"Ow." But it's like,
Yes.
okay, that's a feeling that I don't like it,
Yep.
but hopefully I don't have those ever again,
Yep.
which they came and went, every now and then, but I
And
haven't had them in a long time.
there's whole
So,
teachings on that. Where's the pain where is that suffering in your body? So
mhm,
that you become aware, "Wow, it feels like a tightness in my shoulders, my chest is aching, my stomach feels sick," or whatever, "Oh my god, my
mhm,
fingers are feeling numb or tingly." Like, how do you connect, an emotional, mental suffering, emotional pain, whatever that is, into a physiological, response in your body, because
mhm,
that helps connect it and integrate all that stuff and then release and transmute it, right? There's
yeah,
many different schools of process for how you do that, but ultimately, um, that ability to sort of witness it and feel it in its fullness actually is what
and
heals it.
yeah, and when I some of the main ones when it was really intense, when the divorce was really,
Mm,
new, or I don't wanna say new, but, still big things going on with family. That feeling when I stepped back and went, "Ah, this sucks. What is this?" Later on down the road, I had that feeling, but it was, instead of 100%, it was down to like 40%. It was like,
yep,
"Ooh, I
yep,
feel that feeling coming.
but
Uh-oh,
it's not
that's
quite
because."
as intense as before, but it's
Yeah,
there.
but at least I knew what
Yep,
it was. It wasn't like, "Okay, whatever, I'm feeling blah. This is inside me," not thinking about what it was. Then I
yep,
started thinking,
yep,
"Okay, this is where I'm going.
yep.
Take some breaths. It's okay."
Awareness.
Awareness. Yeah, good answer. Thank you.
Yep.
Awareness.
You're
So,
you're more aware of what was going on, which is why we're always talking about, like teaching the meditation and the pattern interrupt, and those become tools in your toolbox so that when
mhm,
that happens, you're like, okay, let me just take a deep breath. Let me just settle down. And
yep.
how to use the tool of a brief quiet meditation or just quieting and moving the breath gently through the body, right? And
Yeah.
that's a tool that you can use because you've practiced it for months, and then when this thing comes up you can kind of, okay, let me just settle down and use this tool.
Mhm.
That's the importance of that, right? It's almost like you're training, just like a
Yes,
sport. How you
totally.
perform, I always said that how you perform is based on how you train, whether it's martial
Mhm.
arts or football or anything. They drill a million times without the opponent so that when the opponent's
Yep.
there, it's automatic and instinctive how
Mhm.
they react right in that moment of,
Yeah.
of combat or whatever that is. And it's the same way with your emotional reaction and your physiological reaction to something, right?
Mhm.
If you train the piece and if you drill it and you you become familiar with what that feels like and how to shift from, oh, there's a little stress at work. Let me calm myself
Yeah.
down. Oh, there's a little stress at work. Let me calm myself. Oh, there's a little stress with traffic. Let me calm myself down. Oh, there's a little stress with bills. Let me calm myself down. Oh, there's a stress.
Mhm.
Then when the big stress happens with some emotional thing with your partner or something like that, you're like, I got a tool that'll help me calm down, and I know it works because I've practiced it all the time with these little
Mhm.
things, these minor things.
Yeah.
So that's the importance of that.
Because stress does happen. Don't think, "Oh, I'm
Right.
I'm the
Life
only one
happens.
I'm the only one that's stressed out in traffic. I'm the only one that's upset. Why am I the bad problem?" Because our mind goes to we're the bad problem.
Yeah.
No, you're gonna have it. Just work on that because I guarantee you, everybody around you has the same thing. Just
Yeah.
different levels, different areas, different things.
Yes.
So don't come back to the negative on yourself when you have
Yeah.
those stresses. Just say,
Right.
"How do I deal with this?"
Yeah.
A couple deep breaths.
Yeah.
Stop, drop, stop, drop, and breathe. You
Yep.
know, even when driving,
Mhm.
don't literally drop. Just drop the thought
Yeah.
into your heart, and then breathe a
Awareness.
little
Yep.
bit. Yeah,
100%.
and I want to jump back, because I didn't want to stop the conversation. But you were talking about, talking to your wolf pack, talking to your, pastors, talking to whatever religious person you have, whatever friends you have. Um, Same book, the Inner Excellence. Um, there's a quote from Apollo Anton Ono. I had to read that right because the Olympic speed skater. So
Yep.
if you remember him,
That was
just
a long time ago.
phenomenal. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So Apollo Ono, here's his quote, and this is in life. I mean, he talks about this, about um, in his sport when he failed.
Mhm.
Which we always talk about failure. You don't stop; you just keep trying and trying and trying. So he says this: the conversation doesn't end when you fail. That's when the conversation starts. So in his world, he was talking about, okay, when I didn't do this skating piece right or this part right, it's not like, okay, I guess I suck. I'm out.
Yep.
He in the book, if you read it more, he did certain things. He had his trainer come in to live with him and do it boom, 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 constant full time. Because I need to work on this. So instead of saying, you know what, I failed, I'm out, that his conversation is like for him, okay, I'm not good. I'm not going to skate anymore. I'm going to move on. Our conversation we're talking about on this podcast is when things go tough, when things get bad, when a bad situation happens. Don't just say this is I'm a bad person, it's over, or this situation is going to engulf me. No, just because something goes wrong in your mind, in your world, don't stop. That's when you need to start having those conversations.
Mhm.
Start looking within yourself. Okay. What's going on? Why is this happening? What can I do to get through this?
Mhm.
Whether it's me, whether it's the whole situation, whether it's the other person, what can you do to get through this situation? So when things go down that dark rabbit hole, start having those conversations.
Right.
Don't say it's over and fail. Say, oh, I failed. No.
Yep.
Okay. How can we start having a conversation to make things better?
Yeah.
And that, by the way, that quote, I think we need that in society. That should be on
For
billboards
sure.
everywhere because society itself says, okay, we failed certain things. How do we have conversations together to make this work? So don't ever, and we've talked about, reaching out to those people that you have friends or, whoever they are. Um, so when things start going down, when things start to fail, as Ono says in his
Quote
world,
unquote. Yep.
quote unquote, yeah, you need to start having conversations, reach out to people.
And
So I would rephrase that. Conversations don't stop when we have hard times. That's when conversations and friends need to start.
absolutely. And the first conversation is the conversation you're having with yourself,
Hmm.
right? How do you relate to yourself? Right. Like you're always talking about curiosity. Wow, I may never feel
Hmm.
this feeling again. And that's a conversation you're literally having with yourself towards
Yeah.
that situation. Like it's an attitude that you're expressing towards yourself. And so
Hmm.
that's, and then also conversations with other people, right? So it's
Yeah.
really important how you're thinking. And because I think that some of us, if you have like really bad self esteem, if you're really feeling like, you've been, traumatized by your upbringing and stuff like that, that it's really hard to have a positive conversation with yourself. That's the truth.
Yeah.
I think both
Hmm.
of us were really blessed. We had really positive mothers. Um,
Hmm.
for all the stuff my mom went through growing up, for the most part, she was pretty
Yeah.
positive, and, I think my sister
Hmm.
might disagree with that, but for the most part, she tried, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
and I think I felt that, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't perfect, but she, Or versus, literally, people have been in some really horrific situations in their upbringings, right? And so then how do
Yeah,
you if you have that, how do you have a positive mental conversation? And that can be the first place you have to start, right? And that's
yeah.
not always easy. Um,
And
one of the
that's where you do that conversation with self and
Mhm.
say, "Okay, where am I? Who do I need to talk to?"
Yeah,
Because you can't do it alone. And it's
yeah,
okay not to be okay, and you
yeah,
can't do it alone. Don't try
yes,
to do it alone. Find
yes,
somebody,
yes.
please.
And that's the
So,
tough part because sometimes people think they're not worth it, right? I'm not,
yeah.
yeah. And
Mhm.
so that's something that, I have nothing but infinite compassion for because it's such a devastating place to be when you feel like that. But
Mhm.
please, like Dave said, reach out to us, reach out to somebody, reach out to, you know, find somebody and spend the time. And if you're listening to this, and obviously, you're taking the time to sort of, to look for ways that are better to do things, right?
Mhm.
And that does sort of bring up the other thing that those quotes I'd have alluded to and touch base on that I wanted to bring up about is, the bigger question almost becomes sometimes people will say, is suffering necessary? You know,
Mm. Mm.
why would God make us suffer, period? You know,
Ooh.
and
Yeah, good point.
do we need to? Now, I'm not sure how in the Western Christian traditions, but in the Eastern traditions, because they're more like the yin yang, you know,
Yep.
dark and light. There's an approach where, yeah, that's just part of it. And some teachings they'll talk about like polarity and duality. Like this is a dimension, the third dimension, the physical reality is dualistic in its very nature. And that is something that is proven out even with quantum physics. For every particle, there's an opposite particle. So
Mhm.
there's quark and a negative quark and a positive quark. There's electrons and then there's positrons. There's, you know,
Mhm.
dark matter and matter. You know what I mean? There's all these, it's all dualistic. There's an opposite for there's a flip side to every single coin. Um, and so that's sort of the nature of this reality is it's dualistic. And so that, trying to escape that and going only into light and all I want just positivity does not work. So that's why we
Mhm.
always talk about being open to and accepting and looking at those things that are quote unquote negative, right? Um, but is it necessary, right? Is it necessary? And I think the first paragraph we talked about sitting on the couch of comfort is
Mhm.
hard to get up and go into discipline and train hard, right? From a physical athletic standpoint, right?
Yeah.
But oftentimes we get complacent, right? In our patterns and our thoughts and our
Mhm.
behaviors and our life. And so sometimes it's the suffering that becomes a catalyst to looking at how's everything going and evaluating and having that conversation. Like that's what Ono is saying,
Mhm.
right? Hey, when the things start to go wrong, that's when I start the conversation of what's going on and how can I change
Mhm.
that? Right. The
Yep.
conversation starts. So that's another kind of way to sort of look at or reframe suffering, reframe
And
negative things
yeah.
so that
And
you're
our
looking at
Yeah, our couch, not the physical, not the couch of an athlete sitting on the couch and not working out. Our couch that we're coming from right now is the couch of complacency, going like, well, I can just I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to keep it with
yep,
me.
yep,
So that's sitting on the couch, not doing anything. So you need to get off the couch and talk to somebody, have that
yep,
conversation.
yep.
So um, somebody,
And
and if you don't have someone you can talk to right now, start looking around. Get off the couch. Sorry,
mhm,
get off the couch and start looking for people.
yeah,
Find one friend.
resources. What are
Yeah,
your
find your
resources?
resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what
So
your
do it
minister
now.
talked about that? Was that
What's
your
that?
was that your
Yeah.
minister talked about
Mhm.
resourcing? Yes.
Yep.
A couple episodes ago,
Mhm.
we were talking about resources. What are your resources and expanding your resources? This is a
Mhm.
resource. Obviously, if you're listening to this becomes a resource, right? But what we're encouraging is that you extend beyond even this, right? Into you can read books, you can go to workshops, you can, do those things, but you can also reach to your wolf pack, to
Mhm.
ministers and people like that. If you don't have something like that, maybe you find something like that, right? Um,
Yeah.
but
And
expanding the resources.
yeah, and understand we're not experts on
Yeah.
psychology
Yep.
or
Yep.
doctriness or anything like that. But understand if you ever message us and you say you want to talk, you need help, you don't know
Yep.
what to do, we will reach out. We'll help find something.
Yep.
We don't know. We will
100%.
use our resources to help you. So just know
Yes.
that there's always at least one spot you can reach out to.
Yes.
Just know that. I'm gonna do. sidebar real quick so they know
Yeah,
that they're
we've
in
the
spot.
whole point of this is to hopefully touch
Mhm,
somebody in a way that maybe inspires them or encourages them or supports them
mhm,
into moving forward and, addressing things that aren't super fulfilling in their life, right? So that they can have a more full life. That's the bottom line, right? Everything that we've been through, whether
mhm.
it's, me being, suicidal at one point in my life, me being addicted to, you know, all the drugs.
All the
You know,
we won't
all
we
of
won't
them,
list them all.
yeah, all of them, you know, uh,
Which drug did you take? Yes.
all of them, yes,
Yes.
pretty much.
Um, yeah, and on that point, if you're in that spot and you're looking for resources, if you're in a good spot and you know friends that might need resources, reach out to them.
Yeah,
Because and just say, hey, here's a podcast, maybe just to listen to.
yeah,
This will give you a start talking point, you know. Um, or you may have some other book, you may have some one for them to talk to. But if you know friends that are kind of in that spot, don't be afraid to reach out. It's hard, but
yep,
if they're in that spot, you may be the one that
yep,
helps them. So,
yes,
so the podcast, or you just talking to them, or you giving them a resource of somewhat
yes.
somewhere.
Liking,
So,
subscribing, and sharing can help.
yes.
Sharing it with people can be a real tool for somebody, to, um, expand their resources, right? Expand their network of resources.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, looking at suffering, is it necessary? Just sort of reframing how you think about that and look at that as
Hmm.
a way of, okay, is this the beginning? Let's make this the beginning of a conversation about how we heal this and transform this and transmute this, or through forgiveness, through different ways of looking at it, so that we can move through this without ignoring it, without repressing it, and end it with an attitude of compassion and kindness for yourself as you're going through that process. That that you can say it's necessary. It's part of life. It is what it is, right? You can't. I always say that it is what it is.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, like you have to start with that place. Okay, this is where I'm at, and it kind of
This is where
sucks
I'm
right
at.
now. It sucks
Hmm.
right now, and I don't like it, and that's okay. You know, and then how do we look at that, right? So
Yeah. Hmm.
rather than woe is me, victimhood kind of thing, right? And so part of that, does shift that out of, okay, I have some agency here. I have
Hmm.
things I can do. I have resources I can reach out
And
to. I
yeah,
have some
when you're in
power
that,
here.
yeah, when you're in that spot, like when you just said, this is where I am. This is it. It's not good. It may not be a good spot, but okay, I'm here. That's when the conversation starts. How do
Yes,
I go
that's
from here to where I want to be?
yep,
you know so I don't know how close we are to closing up, but I'm going to
yep,
do my three little things real quick. I got three things. So one, like the I'm reading right from the book a little bit, that Western culture, suffering is the opposite of success.
yep.
Okay. We learn, but that's wrong. We learn
From
from our
Yeah.
failures.
There's
Okay,
always a
so understand
conversation
that.
that can be had from that, and when
Yeah.
you try to repress and avoid it at all costs, you're actually doing that to your own detriment.
Yeah. So
Yep.
success can, failure or suffering can be success. Okay,
Yes.
because you're
The
learning from it.
seed
So
of
understand
it.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And then Ono's quote: "The conversation doesn't end when you fail. That's when the conversation starts." So when things are going down or things aren't where they need to be, catch it quickly if you can and start having that conversation. And then the last thing I want to leave you with is this quote: "You can carry your past with you in bitterness, or you can let it go in forgiveness." And that's a
Yes.
long process. We're not saying it's easy and
Yep.
short, but it's a process that you can begin by having conversations and understanding that suffering is success. So all three of those tie in together. So
Absolutely. That's huge. And I think that's it. That's the summary. That's the homework.
yeah, homework is just play that out. Okay, start
Yes.
having the conversations.
Yes.
Understand that. Hey, whoops, I failed today. I'm gonna learn something from it. Move on.
Yes.
So
And maybe even one of the resources becomes Inner Excellence, that book, right? We'll put a
yes,
link to the book.
yeah. Put a link
So,
to the book. So
um,
if you can, yeah. So yes, and always reach out. Have somebody. Find that wolf
yes.
pack. People
Yes.
find those because Sheldon was my wolf pack.
Yeah.
So he's one of my
Yeah.
few wolf packers.
Yes.
So
Yes. Um,
so yes, man. Yeah, make sure you like, subscribe. Let us know, share
yeah.
any thoughts and ideas. We'd love to hear them. So hope you
Yeah.
guys have a great week. Keep that smile on, and make it a positive, great week.
Yes. Take care. We love you.